All right. Good evening again. Let's see if I can adjust my camera properly. Good evening again. I want to see if I can talk and crochet at the same time. This is going to be one of the first times of experimenting with this. Can I crochet and carry on a talk? I'm going to have to do some pausing here and there, but I'm going to try it just to see if we can get some kind of flow here. So the question that I have to this specific video is basically for anybody, whether it's okay, we're just going to go with the language nerd. If you're a language nerd like myself, is this something that is inherently going to make you socially isolated? And is it possible to have a normal life? Is it possible to have friends and, not just be completely immersed in studying languages 24 hours a day? And I think there's several things to say about this. And the first thing is, I think that there needs to be a balance between social interaction and isolation and independent study. And that's something that I think that I myself personally have found not too difficult to have that balance, where I will spend hours and hours at a time studying grammar and studying different language properties, whether it's vocabulary, spending hours at a time working on flashcards and hours at a time working on developing language skills. But at the same time, this is not something that's going to be used in isolation. So I'm just going to spend, hours and hours in isolation studying a language with the purpose being to just spend more time in isolation. I would say that there needs to be a balance then as far as making friends and interacting in that said language. I would say that German was my first real language that I had an opportunity to actually converse with people and interact in German. And that was something that when I was about 15 and 16 years old, I used to twice a week have opportunities to talk to people in German. One was a German it was a coffee stunde, a coffee hour at a local college back when I lived in Northern Indiana. Valparaiso University, I was able to attend a coffee stunde, and I would talk with both the college students when I was in high school, and I also interacted and talked with people that were more like grandparents' age that just were in the community and wanted to have somebody to talk with. So it was older people, younger people, a few kids. Thank you for whoever's watching. A few kids. I remember one of the only other people I've ever met with my same name, Nathaniel, was a little boy who spoke German, and he corrected me. I said something about, I think I said, I don't know, some word that was with D instead of Das or Das instead of D, and he corrected me. He was 8 and I was 15. And so there was this opportunity to talk and interact with people who actually spoke German, both kids, college students, and older senior citizens. And we played games together, interacted together. And I think that the purpose of studying any language, whether it's German, whether it's Hebrew, whether it's French or whatever, should include that social interaction. Now, can an individual just talk and socially interact with people and learn and develop all the language skills necessary without cracking open the books, spending hours and hours on homework? I'm not sure. I think that it depends on the language, of course, and there are some languages that could be developed to a pretty fluent level without a lot of cracking open the books and memorizing flashcards and all that kind of stuff. If it's something like Hebrew, that's an interesting story because there's the modern Hebrew where I've actually made friends in Israel, and I've gone to bookstores in Israel and talked to people in Hebrew. And I remember one of my first conversations or requests was at a McDonald's. I wanted shalot, what was it? Shesh glidot. Shisha glidot is what I said. And basically like 6 ice creams. And the guy asked like, Konim, you want them in cones? And I was so nervous, but I pushed myself so I would speak Hebrew in Jerusalem, starting when I was 16. And every time I went to Jerusalem after that, which is about 7 different times, I pushed myself to talk in Hebrew and to interact with people, listen to what other people are saying, try to interact with people the best I can, and to make friends and acquaintances and actually speak Hebrew. And so one of the times in Jerusalem, I remember that I was having a Shabbat dinner, and one of my friends, boyfriends, didn't really speak English that well, but spoke Hebrew. And so he decided to take me on a little drive around Jerusalem and just have a conversation with me in Hebrew. And it was amazing because I didn't understand every single word he was saying, but he spoke basic enough, and I understood at a basic enough level that I had a full blown out interaction with him. And I remember he said something about Ariel Sharon, who hayab a coma, and I'm thinking, okay, a coma, okay, so he was in a coma, Ken, and he Yudea Mazay, Ariel Sharon, who hayab a coma, Ariel Sharon is in a coma, and it wasn't just like the hi, what's your name, how old are you, or that kind of thing, but he was actually having a political discussion about Ariel Sharon and Jerusalem politics and all that kind of stuff, and it was something that I was interested in and I wanted to learn, and I had a very good discussion, even though he didn't speak any English, at least not that much, and we talked in Hebrew, and so we made friends. And so I could say that even though some of my study of, say, Hebrew was independent, I was basically locked in my room, or maybe not locked in my room, but you know what I mean. I was in my room all by myself, hours and hours at a time, studying a language that in the United States, I didn't really have anybody to talk to or utilize that much. I could use it for reading some of the Bible, but didn't really have friends or that I could talk with. It paid off when I did have friends to talk to in Jerusalem and that kind of thing. And so I would say that there needs to be that balance. I'm giving an example with Hebrew or with German, but I would say that every language that I've studied, there's always been maybe a sense of independent development and independent study where I'm just kind of studying this on my own. And then there's also the sense of, hey, actually, I can make friends with people with this language that maybe without knowing this language, I couldn't have developed those friendships and those interactions. Or it would have just been different. Like the last school year, I was working at a school in Cincinnati, Ohio, where a lot of the kids were Hispanic, and they spoke Spanish a lot better than they did English. And even though I didn't end up becoming fluent or anything in Spanish, I was able to use a little Spanish that I knew. I used some methods like the Pimsleur method, and compared a lot of verb charts with Latin grammar to try to get acquainted with the structure of the language. And then I just listened and I asked questions and I interacted with the kids. And I think that even though I didn't have to know Spanish to have taught at that school, just the fact that I knew as much Spanish as I did and I was trying and I was able to, tell a little kid, no Fablo. And I remember one of the kids, bless his heart, he thought I was dumb. He's like, you dumb. Why do you say no Fablo? You mean no hablo? And I told him no. I said, no, Fablo is correct. Hablo was, secondary. First Latin, it was no Fablo. Non Fablo then turns into no hablo. But it was a teaching method, that I was explaining how Latin developed and turned into Spanish. And I was able to develop a teaching relationship with a lot of these students that they may not have learned otherwise. They might have never known that Spanish had a papa language or mama language Latin. They might never have known that, that Spanish and English weren't the only two languages in the world. I think that was one thing that one of the kids did end up telling me, like that basically he thought that the only two languages in the world were Spanish and English. And for him, realizing that there's other languages and that Spanish and English weren't the only languages in the world, it was an interesting experience for him. So I would say that definitely if you're learning languages and your key is, I need to spend a lot of time by myself, isolated in my bedroom or, whatever, wherever you like to study, one of the things that I would recommend is just to make sure that you're balancing social interaction with people and use the language to develop those friendships, and and balance it between that and then isolated working on it individually, where I think that my German skills would not be as high if I had not spent so much time on my own. And same with my Hebrew skills. If I didn't spend all the time that I did on my own, they would not be as high as they are, and I wouldn't be able to make as good of connections with people that do speak Hebrew and German and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I can definitely see some people kind of just spending all their time learning a language. I mean, like say French, for instance, and never using it, or say spending all their time wanting to, I don't know, speak Esperanto or something. And if you don't have a community of people that speak Esperanto, what's the point of spending all your time studying Esperanto, and at the end of the day, you don't have anybody to speak with? Now, at the same time, if you are wanting to learn Esperanto because you have friends who speak Esperanto and you're wanting to be part of a community of people that speak Esperanto, and this is part of your social skills that, hey, I really love these people and they speak Esperanto and I'm really inspired that I want to speak Esperanto, then by all means, you should probably speak Esperanto as well. So I would say that there needs to be a balance. And I think that that's something that as a language, I don't know how to describe it. I guess language nerd, language acquirer, and also language teacher myself, I would definitely say that there needs to be that proper balance. And if the proper balance is there, then there will be the time necessary to study, and there will also be the time necessary to use it. And I would have to just leave it there to try to say, what percentage needs to be the balance or anything like that. I wouldn't worry about that. I would just say that there should be a balance. Anybody who's trying to study multiple languages needs to be able to have some time by him or herself just focused on understanding the grammar, learning vocabulary, speaking it maybe just with oneself, okay? And then there needs to be some type of an outlet where you're actually going to talk to people, and it's got to be either, through the internet, over Zoom. There's a lot of good communities like that, or in person, like, going to a community college or somewhere where there's actually like a coffee student and you speak German, say a French hour, you can speak French. Try to find those places where you can actually utilize the language. And if you do that, I do believe that that type of language acquisition will be able to grow and develop in the way that it needs to grow and develop. And it won't just be book knowledge, but it will actually be a language that you've acquired, made friendship through that language, and forever after. I think that'll help you then to remember the language, especially if you have friends that you can converse through that language, talk to in that language, and develop relationships in that language, whether it's Latin, whether it's Greek, whether it's Hebrew, whether it's Swahili or Telugu. If you have friends, and that's sort of the connection of you and the language, then you are going to lastingly remember the language, and it's going to be a lot more fun to know the language. Now, I should balance this with a classics major. One of the things that I'm required to do is to have an active knowledge of, or more of a passive knowledge of, French, so that I can read scholarly articles in French. And one of the things that I think happens, thank you for whoever's watching me live, one of the things that happens is a lot of the scholars, they only understand French as a literary language. And so they will not be able to speak French, but they will be able to read articles in French. Is this a possible thing to do? Yes, because the language skills that are necessary to speak French are not the same as being able to read it. So for instance, I do not speak French. I'm trying to develop a very basic spoken French at the moment, but I cannot say as of right now that I speak French. Now, I did read an article in French that was about an archaeological discovery, and I was able to look up the few words that I didn't understand from my Latin knowledge, and I was able to read it at a pretty good level. There was one word that looked like también in Spanish, and sure enough, it meant the same thing as también. And so from my Spanish abilities and my Latin abilities, I was able to read French, and I understood what I was saying in French. Did this mean that I could just go to France and I could be like, yeah, I speak French? No. I've listened to some music in French. I'm trying to acquire some basic knowledge of French, but just being able to read French is not giving me the skills of being able to be conversant in French. Now, why is that important to explain here? It's because technically speaking, you could study French and never develop friends that speak French. So, for instance, I could say that French is one of the languages that I acquire and don't have any friends that speak French, and so maybe at the end of the day, I'll just know French just to read it, and I won't speak it. I won't have any friends in French, and I will live the rest of my life, and I will never, ever speak French to anybody, but I'll understand French, and I just won't use it. I don't like that idea, but it's a possibility, and there are a lot of people out there that do that type of thing, and they seem to be okay with it. I would highly recommend that if you do, say, study something like French, even like me as a beginner, I'm comparing everything with other Romance languages, like comparing French with Latin and comparing it with Spanish and Romanian and that type of thing. And I think that for me, I know some people that know some French, okay? And I've told them when I get to at least, I don't know, say conversational, that I want to acquire a better vocabulary, and I'm to the point where I want to actually start talking to people, I have people to talk to. And that's something that I've got a list in the back of my head of different people where I'm like, you know what? I know a lot of people that speak French, either as a second language or a first language, and they do know French at a very good level. And when I'm ready, I will be able to call them up on the phone, maybe do some Zoom lessons or meetings, and just, talk to people in French. And that's something where for my level right now, I want to get to a point where I actually have the grammar down, and I want to build it starting with speaking to myself. I actually like the Pimsleur method. That's something that I started with Hebrew when I was 13. And I've been able to do a lot with the Pimsleur method as far as building some type of a basic repertoire of a spoken just base for a language like Hebrew. I was able to start with having a spoken base for Hebrew. And then from that spoken base, I acquired a bunch of vocabulary. I had private lessons and went through several years of private studies, but beyond the, Pimsleur basic level stuff. And that's something where I think with, say, French, I want to try using the Pimsleur method, also compare some charts. I have a lot of success with writing out verb charts and noun charts. So that's something where, say that you do like the Pimsleur method that's only spoken or mainly spoken, I would encourage work separately with the grammar. And that's something where the Pimsleur, I think, is good for building a foundation with the spoken language, but definitely work with the grammar. And that's something that I've done. And I think that I've succeeded fairly well, at least in the languages that I've utilized the most that way. Now, does that mean that I think the Pimsleur method is a tried and true method for everybody and everybody should just use this method? No, some language experts would not even recommend it because of how much it relies on the spoken form of the language. Now, for Latin, they don't have a Pimsleur. I wouldn't recommend that. Latin is very much a written language, and I think speaking Latin is nice. And I do have friends that speak Latin, but that is something where I would have to say that with Latin specifically, that the spoken form of the language is not going to be the most popularized form of the language, and it's not the most, dare I say, important. I would say overall on an academic level, yes, spoken Latin is not as important academically. Now, for me, I actually like the idea of spoken Latin, and so I'm making some friends. I've made friends who speak Latin. I know people that some of the people I know, basically all of our conversations have been in Latin. And it's interesting, making friends through a medium of Latin and you don't necessarily speak English. It's interesting. Okay. Now, yeah, that's how things go. Now, okay, so back to the Pimsleur. Is that something that I would recommend? Absolutely, for starters. If you want to say start speaking French, the spelling is so different. You need to have somewhere to be able to really work on how to pronounce the French. So definitely for Pimsleur, I would say that could be helpful for starting like basic 101 spoken French. Say something like Spanish. I did utilize the Pimsleur method a little bit last semester when I was working with these kids that spoke Spanish, just to help me get some practice with some basic, conversational ideas, like just I want some water, help me, where's directions to the restaurant. Not that I would necessarily use that for a classroom setting, but just getting myself comfortable speaking just by myself, say in the car on my way to work. I think it was helpful then because after I was speaking Spanish, maybe 20 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day on the way to, let's say, the school, then I think that my mouth was more ready to start talking to the kids in Spanish, even if it was very basic Spanish and even if it was something that, didn't show that it had that high of a level of Spanish, but it was something that was there and it was easier to just start speaking Spanish because I had been speaking Spanish in the car rather than say I would have to find that way to start speaking Spanish. And I've never been speaking Spanish a day in my life. It would have been a whole lot harder. So anyways, if you're wondering what I'm crocheting, I'm hoping this is going to turn into a scarf eventually. Right now it is in the process of being made. And that is kind of going to go to my other question, which I'm going to actually stop the video here and I'm going to do a different stream. And the plan of that different stream is if you or I are a language learner and a language nerd, let's say, somebody that loves languages so much that we spend so many hours of the day studying languages, if we are that much of a language learner, is it possible to have other skills and other hobbies and other things that we do? Or do we have to literally dedicate our entire lives, with the exception of, eating, sleeping, and going to the bathroom, and just do only language studies? So we're going to talk about that in the next stream. Thank you very much. And till then.